Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, Purple Shirt Day. And that's all. That's all I wanted to talk about, my purple shirt. I'll see you later. Ha ha, just fooling. No, today is Purple Shirt Day, but it's also Veeam. V-E-E-A-M, Veeam Backup and Replication Day. We're getting started with our lab series today. So part and parcel of that is showing you the tools that I use to manage my virtual machine images. And I've been using a product called Veeam Backup and Replication. Been using it, probably 3 or 4 years now. They make a free version. If all you want to do is simply do a backup and restore of your virtual machines without any of the whiz-bang features, Veeam offers a free version of their backup and replication software that works really well, especially for my needs. It's very simple. You don't have any automated backups or anything like that. But what it allows you to do is basically take an image of your virtual machine file, save it as a zip file with compression. You can save it to an external hard drive. You can save it to your NAS. You can save it wherever you want to. And that allows you, rather than having to export and import the machine, which can be a bit of a tricky process under Windows Server, it allows you to simply just back up and restore the images at will, and to save space while you're doing it as well. This product also works with VMware ESXi. So if you're curious, read on this video and you'll see some of the neat little features of Veeam. I go over a complete install on the system, but I don't really get it. You know how I do my installs. I expect you. There's a pause button on YouTube. So if you're having trouble keeping up, just pause it, go back. You can move the little slider back and forth. This is not a step-by-step tutorial. This is how I did it in my situation. So enough talking. Let's get started with the video where you might learn something. So in order to get a Veeam Backup and Replication installed so that we can start getting our lab server set back up, we need to create a Windows Server 2012 R2. That's what I've decided to go with. Seems to work pretty well with Veeam. So I have an image out there of a Windows 2012 R2 server. I have a gold master image out there, so I'm importing that, and then I'll tweak it, boot it up, make sure all the updates are done on it, join it to the domain, and then we'll go through the process of installing Veeam Backup and Replication on there, so you can see what's entailed in that. I've already done this before, but during all my iterations of playing with Unraid and whatnot, I had wiped that out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to connect to this machine, and we'll boot it up. And what we'll need to do, this is going to be a regular on the network server, so we'll need to hard code its IP address. So that's one of the first things we'll do, and then we'll run updates on it, Windows updates on it that I have of the WSUS offline updater, and then we shall see if we can then join it to the domain. So just go ahead and log in as normally. So we see it's automatically getting assigned by DHCP, so I don't want to do that. What I want to do is get it a dedicated IP address. That IP address that I've selected for it is 5.9, so we'll go ahead and we'll put that in there. Now, we may or may not see this. Sometimes when you manually assign an IP address to Windows Server, it doesn't take. I'll show you what I'm talking about. It may or may not happen. I think 6 is my domain controller. Yeah, 6 is my domain controller, so Now, anytime I change an IP, I like to reboot a server. So let's do that. Now, I have already used, I had a Veeam machine set up earlier as a test, as proof of concept. So this machine name has already been used on the network, so I'll need to make sure I go out of my domain controller. I'll show you how I do that before I join this machine to the network. Now you see right here, it's not showing that it's connected to the mcs.local. If we come here under status, it seems to be working. Let's see if it can, let's see here if I can go out to a command prompt and do some pinging. Yeah, I'm getting the IPv6 address, so switch that to 4. Now, this may or may not work. Yes, it does. Good. So we didn't have that problem this time where the IP address doesn't take in Windows Server for some reason. It's just that I've gotten used to using it now, so I pretty much use it. So we're going to call this machine. Let me tell you what I'm doing. So I'm coming up here to computer name, and we just change it right here. And we're going to call this MCS-backup. Just so I know what it is. Now, while I got you here, we'll go into the, while this thing is rebooting, we'll go into the domain control, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. You can reuse a computer name in a Microsoft Windows network, but you have to make sure that you reset the account under Active Directory, users and computers. If you go out under computers, you will see that there is a MCS backup already there, and if I right click and go to properties, you'll see it already has that machine in there. The problem is it's generated a SID number, a security identifier, and if you try to join this machine back to the domain with the same computer name already exists, you're going to get a problem with Active Directory. So what you simply do is you right click on the machine name and you go to reset account, and it gives you one chance to pardon the updates intruding. It gives you one chance to tell it yes or no, so we're going to tell it yes. So now that account has been reset, and we should be able to join that server to the domain. Let me log out here of my domain controller. We don't need that up and running. And then we'll log into this one and see if we can't join it to the domain. It should be hopefully a relatively painless procedure. Now I've shown you by the way I do it by going through Server Manager. You can also go through, let's see here, right click. You can also go through properties. So if you open File Explorer and you right click on this PC, come down to properties, you also have another way to change the name and the domain right here. So I'm going to do change settings, change, and now I'm going to join my domain. So just remember, you can join machines on and off the domain, rename them, whatever you want to do, but you have to be consistent, and you have to go back into Windows and you have to reset those accounts before you give a computer the same name that you've had in use before. Otherwise, your Active Directory is not going to work. It's going to get all screwed up. So once you join the domain and log back in, it takes it a little bit longer to to boot up the machine. It's doing its little security updates and whatnot in the background, getting it prepared to be a domain member. So you may notice it takes a little bit longer to boot up, and there's the proof in the pudding right there. It's applying security policy to the system. So we'll let that run. Now the next thing I need to do after this is make sure I've got all the updates. I need to change this account to log on as a domain administrator. So this is one way to ensure that you're logging into the domain, is put the @local on there, and then that'll make sure that you've joined, or that you're actually logging into the domain. And the first thing you're going to notice is that your desktop settings have changed. So I'll need to go out and fix that. I've gotten kind of used to the Windows Server 2012 R2 start menu, so it's not quite as annoying as it was before, but there are still some settings that I just prefer to use. Now, because it's a new user in a new domain, it's going to always pop up Server Manager, so we're going to need to go in and turn that off. I'm not a real big fan of Server Manager popping up every time, and that's really fairly simple to do. You simply come over here to Manage, Server Manager Properties, and do not start Server Manager automatically at login. And then I'm going to close Server Manager. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to go out to, now that I'm a member of the domain, I should be able to go out after I turn Network Discovery on, and I should be able to browse to the NAS and go down to the WSUS offline updater. Or is it Windows Updates now? Yeah, WSUS offline 108 into the ISO directory, and here's all my Windows updates. And Windows Server 2012, I believe, is 6.3, and it's a 64-bit version. So if we mount that image and then run the update installer, that should get us all the updates as of 7/8 of 2017. So we'll let this run. Okay. I'm not going to hold you all here while we run these updates. Suffice it to say, I'm going to run this program over and over again until all the updates are done. Then when that's done, I'm going to go out to Windows Update on the computer itself, make sure there aren't any more updates out there. All of this needs to be done before we install Veeam on there. So we'll let this run and we'll come back when all of that is done and updated. Alright, so now we have the updates are all done. So now let's get into installing Veeam. And basically Veeam makes this great little piece of backup software. It's called Veeam Backup and Replication. And they offer it for free if all you use it for is to back up your virtual machines, and it's free. It works on Hyper-V and ESXi, and there's no ads or anything in it. It just works. I love it because it allows you to very easily package your virtual machines into a zip file and basically put them anywhere you want them to. So if you deal with a lot of virtual machines like I do and don't want to keep recreating them, you can zip them, save a bunch of space with them, put them over on your backup server, and do whatever you want to with them. So right here is Veeam Backup and Replication. You download it as an ISO, so all I have to do is mount the ISO. It's over on my NAS. So I'm going to mount it, and then it should appear as a drive here in a few moments. There it is. We're going to go ahead and run setup. I've already done all my updates. You don't have to do all your updates prior to this, but I would strongly recommend. It's just a habit I get into. And what I'm going to do is, I'm not worried about these two. I'm worried about backup and replication. So that's what I'm going to install. Now, it tells you less than 2 processor cores are detected. So what I need to do, I'm going to go ahead and continue anyway, and we'll add a second virtual CPU to that, because I don't want to interrupt the install. And then it wants to install Net Framework. So if we click OK, it'll install that for you as well. Alright, so the Net Framework 4.5 has completed, so I'm going to go ahead and add that second virtual processor to this machine so that we can get rid of that error message that we're getting when we try to install. It shouldn't keep you from installing it, but we'll just go ahead and give it a couple of cores right now while we're in the middle of rebooting from the Net Framework installation. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and log back in, and then we need to go back out and complete the installation of the Veeam software. So we should have 2 processors now. So if we come to File Explorer, go to this PC, and go to Properties, we should see that we now have 2 processors in here. Let's see. And we do. We have 2 cores. Alright. So let's go back out to our NAS. And let's go down to our Veeam folder. We're going to need to mount that image one more time. And this is rather large. It's a 2 terabyte or 2 gigabit image, so it takes just a wee bit to mount that. Now we should no longer get the little message about having dual processors. I have set Veeam up before on a Windows 7 and a Windows 10 machine, and I just find it's easier to run the Veeam Backup Manager on a Windows Server version. Not that it didn't work, but you might have some permissions issues when you try to get it to work on a workstation as opposed to a server. Alright, we need to accept the EULA. And of course, there, we've read it. Alright. I don't have a license file, so it tells me here just click next and the software will operate in free edition mode, which is what we want. I accept all the defaults. I don't create a secondary hard drive for this. I just allow it to install on that primary hard drive. Okay, and it will go ahead and install the missing features here if I click the install button. Okay, so now we're in the green on everything, so now we'll just click next, install, and we'll let this run. It's going to take a few minutes. We'll come back when that's done. Alright, so according to the installation software, it is finished, so we'll click on the finish button. Now I am going to go ahead and I'm going to shut down this machine. We actually are going to restart it, but the first thing I want to do is shut it down and make sure I have the machine labeled properly. Do it now while I'm thinking about it, because you see it still has the 2012 R2 gold. So we need to fix that. I like that to be consistent. While it's doing that, I'm going to go out to File Explorer. Alright, machine is shut down now. Good. So now I can go ahead and rename this. What I'm going to do is I've gone under the virtual hard drive and I want to rename that. So we'll do that MCS Backup, because that is the name of the machine. We'll close that. Close that. We want to edit this virtual machine. Okay, we called it MCS Backup. And since we renamed the hard drive, we need to browse and point to that new image name. Now we should be able to connect and boot up. So you will notice boot times can take a little bit longer. I always like to reboot after I install software. It used to be every time you installed software into Windows you had to reboot, but they've fixed that over the years. Now the trick is that I need to go ahead and see if we can do a restore. I did some backups before I started tinkering with this machine using Veeam. So Veeam has got this is a new install of Veeam as far as this server is concerned. So what I want to do is go out there and see if I can restore one of my virtual machines, one of my lab machines, using Veeam, if it'll work. What this is doing is it's connecting up to the internal web server that Veeam sets up on this machine. That's why it says local host, and that's the port. There it goes. It just takes a few minutes for the services to start up. So it looks like it's trying to connect now. Now it wants to update the product components, so we're going to let that, it's going to back it up on this, or it's going to update those components on this machine. Now when you first run Veeam, it has to go out and it has to install some software on or some services on and you see that's complete. All the components have been upgraded. So you'll see when you add a server, so the first thing we want to do, you notice it does VMware vSphere and Hyper-V right out of the box. It does both of those for free, and it is indeed the free edition. So what I want to do is add this server first. So we will put in MCS-HV is the name of this machine. It is running Hyper-V standalone server, and we're going to go ahead and add some credentials, and we'll add domain credentials. You could create a separate backup account that has the specific credentials you need. We're in a small network on a small Active Directory network, so I just use my administrative account. I click on next, and now what it's going to do is it's going to go out to this server that this virtual machine is running on, and it's going to look for the transport and Hyper-V integration services, and it sees that they're already there, so it's going to go ahead and connect to those. Hopefully we won't get an error message here, and it will rejigger this machine to connect with, or this hypervisor server to connect with this Veeam instance and make it its own. And then we'll need to add the domain controller 2016-DC01 will need to be added, because that is also a Hyper-V server. Okay, it looks like it has been successful, and we'll finish. And let's go ahead and add the 2016-DC01 server as well, so that we can back up and restore machines off there. It is Hyper-V standalone next. We're going to use those credentials we added earlier for this machine, and it should detect that it was previously installed as well, I believe. Yes, you see there it already exists. So what it has to do is go out there and grab those connections and services and tell them, okay, now you belong to this instance of Veeam. And then what we'll do is we'll start a restore. Alright, server has been saved successfully. Next, and finish. So now what we need to do is I want to restore a machine on here. So I have to go to View, Home. Yeah, I want to go home. I'm on this server right here, MCSHV, and I'm going to do a restore. Now it's asking me where the backup file is. So I'm going to browse. And this is on the network. It's on our NAS. So we're going to go to our Xmonology NAS here at MCS NAS. And there should be a folder called Veeam Backups. So I've got my 3CX server, I've got FreePBX, Incredible PBX, Microsoft Exchange, I've got a web server, PBX and a flash. What I want to do is I want to restore these Windows 10 lab machines so we can start doing our lab series again. So I'm just going to highlight this one, and the backup was done on the 10th at 10 p.m. basically. I'm going to open it. It's going to read it. It says reading the backup file. Please wait. Alright, so what it's going to do is it's 1.9 times the size it was, or shrunk that much. So we're going to select a VM to show available restore options. I want to click on restore, and I'm going to restore the entire VM. I can just simply restore the files, or the guest files, or the guest files on Linux. I'm going to restore the entire VM. Okay, the restore point is 6 days ago. I'm going to restore to the original location. Okay, and it tells us what restore point, where it's going to restore it to, and the network mapping. And we'll click on finish. Alright, this is going to take a little bit of time, so we'll let it run and we'll come back when it's completed. It appears that our restore was complete, and it says it was completed successfully, so we're going to close Veeam, and we're going to go back to the hypervisor manager, and we'll see now that we have a Windows 10 Enterprise 64-bit Lab 1 has now been restored. And if we go into settings, we should see that everything is in its proper location. It is. The virtual hard drive has been restored. It's got the right subnet. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue on with the restore of the other machines, and once we're done, we'll come back and we'll talk about how that worked. Make sure it worked, and then we'll go over some more information on how I like to back up my virtual machines, and then once we're done with that, we'll discuss it. So I'm going to go ahead and restore the rest of the virtual machines. You don't need to see me doing that. You've already seen me do one, and we'll come back when that's done. Alright, so all the restores are done. I've got my Web 1 and Web 2, which are a couple of Ubuntu servers. I've got my lab units restored, including my Windows 10 and Windows 7 Ultimate. So that's all I need this backup machine for. So now I can go ahead and shut this down. I know it seems a little redundant to have a whole virtual machine dedicated to Veeam Backup and Restore, but that's fine. I don't use this machine that often to do backups and restores. And that's the other thing. When I'm done with that machine, I then simply power it off until I need it again. And to restore or to back up the virtual machines, and that is all I use it for. Is I use it as like an archival utility. I create a lot of virtual machines, and instead of having to create them over and over again, it's easier just to create one. And you have another choice. You don't have to use Veeam. You can simply export the virtual machine within Windows itself, within the Hyper-V operating system. You would just choose an export setting right here. But you have to be careful with exporting a virtual machine. You have to make sure you do it properly. And then when you import it, you have to import it properly. Otherwise, you run the risk of virtual machines having the same unique identifier on them, and in other words, if you create a gold image like I did for my server 2012, export it and then re-import it, you have to make sure you do the proper steps so you don't have two virtual machines with basically the identical identifier on them for Microsoft Hyper-V. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect to one of these machines, my Windows 10 lab unit. We're going to go ahead and power it up. We want to make sure it works after we have restored it using Veeam. And again, Veeam is free. Just the backup and restore portion of it is free. Veeam has some really good utilities out there for managing virtual machines, and they're a very nice company to deal with. I've dealt with them before. Well, that's a good sign. It came up and it's got the correct time and date. So let's see if I can actually log into this virtual machine and make sure it's going to work properly. I'm just going to assume my other lab units are going to be working for the purpose of this video. And we are getting some errors. We've got a sound error here. Could not reconnect all the drives. That is probably because when I created these machines, I had a different machine on here for my NAS. Let's see if I can force this to map to drive Z, just as a test. Should ask me if I want to. Yes, please. Alright, and then sometimes it'll take that a couple of minutes. Okay, that seems to have worked. The other thing this has on it is Kaspersky, which I am not using. So, and it's expired, I'm sure. That's what it's telling me here. Yeah, it's expired. So I need to remove Kaspersky off this virtual machine and get it once again ready for the lab environment. But as you can see, it's up and running and working well. So if you have the need to back up your virtual machines, whether it's Hyper-V or ESXi, you can't go wrong with Veeam as long as you set it up on a pretty powerful VM. There are other backup and restore solutions for Hyper-V out there. Veeam was one of the ones that I had the best luck with. It was the easiest to install, the least resource intensive. So that's the one I chose to go with. So now I've got all my virtual machines back where they need to be. I still have a bunch of virtual machines out on 2016 DC1. But if I want to test those, this is my production server. But if I wanted to move these over to my test server, it's easy enough to do. I just have to right click on them and tell them to move, and then I can move them to another server. That's one of the benefits of running server 2012 R2 or higher. You now have the ability to move your virtual machines without requiring a third party or another piece of software from Microsoft or even the enterprise version of Microsoft Server to do that. So there you go. You see how easy that, well, it was easy for me. I've done it a few times, so I hope I'm not speaking out of turn when I say it's easy. Now, here's the deal, and you know, people ask me, well, you know, you can do this in Linux, you can do it in, you know, whatever, and that's great. And Linux has its place. Like I've said before, I'm not an anti-Linux guy, but I run my business on Microsoft. My clients run their business on Microsoft software. And even if you're just a little humble guy out there who's learning Microsoft products, there are ways out there. I'm not condoning this behavior in a production environment. Let me be perfectly clear with that. If you cannot afford $500 a year with Microsoft to be a part of their Action Pack subscription, I can understand that. I'm not a wealthy person myself, but I have a business and I am able to expense that expense every year, and it reduces my taxes. So that's how I'm able to justify the $500 a year. You know, it comes up less than $50 a month. I'm sure a lot of you out there blow that much on coffee, right? Go to Starbucks every day, $5 a day. Let's see, there's 30 days in yeah, you can afford Microsoft. if you can afford that for coffee, you can afford to drink coffee at home and have Microsoft's Action Pack subscription. So it is available to you. And if you can't do that, like I've said before, anytime, at least this was the situation up till Windows Server 2012 R2, you can reinstall that or reactivate that software twice on a 180-day trial. So that gives you a total of 360 days on a trial piece of software. So you could install as many Windows servers as you wanted to and just run them in trial mode. They're not crippled in any way. And then past that time, if you still need to evaluate it, there are some activation programs out there that will work and keep Windows Server up and running so that you can keep trying out new things or testing on it. Now, where Microsoft and I'm not condoning the use of those programs. I want you to be clear of that. I've been in your position before. I've had to use programs like that before. And I don't think Microsoft's really going to give a good gosh darn about you using it, as long as you're not selling their software and making the money and not sharing it with Microsoft. So, be legal, but if it's your last effort and you just are setting it up in a lab, I don't have a problem with it. I don't know that Microsoft will or not. Anyway, Veeam makes a whole bunch of other software. Bring you over to their website. For example, what I use, they're not real clear about. They are clear. Limited time offer Veeam for physical and cloud, free and new Veeam agent for Microsoft Windows version 2. So for limited time, they have. They also have the ability to back up. I'm assuming regular Windows workstations in here, but Veeam has a lot of products. The one I use. Veeam. The one I use most of all is the Veeam Backup and Replication, and it is free. I assume it's still free. Let me see here. Well, the one I have is free, so but you can buy the product, and they have a full suite of backup software for Microsoft products, and for also for Linux, for Amazon Web Services. Let's see, Office 365. They have it. There it is, Veeam Backup Free Edition. That's the one I use right there. There's also Veeam Agent for Microsoft Windows and Linux. They're both free. And I need to look into this because I am looking for a backup program for Windows that will allow me to back up my individual workstations to my NAS, and it looks like they have that for free as well. So it'll behoove you to go over to Veeam's website and check out and see what they have available. And like I said, I installed that on a Windows Server 2012 with 2 cores, 4 gig of RAM. The only time I need that machine up and running is when I'm doing the backups or when I'm doing a restore. Otherwise, that machine is asleep and not in use. So, and you can see how easy it was to do a restore. Backups are just as easy. So, if you're going to be dealing a lot with virtual machines, I recommend strongly you get this product and install it and start using it. It'll help you immensely keep track of your virtual machine images. So, anyway, I hope you found this video informative, entertaining as always. Give us a thumbs up down below if you liked it. Leave your comments in the comment section. Subscribe to our channel if you're not already a subscriber. And if you're so inclined, and if you can afford it, go out to Patreon We have a Patreon account. We have a Facebook account. We have a Twitter account, and we have a PayPal account. So if you'd like to donate, even $1 is appreciated. Go out on PayPal or Patreon. I prefer Patreon. They take less of the money for themselves than PayPal does. But I know a lot of people don't have a Patreon account. You don't need one. You can use PayPal to pay your Patreon. But I prefer Patreon if you're going to contribute. We are looking to get an IC dock for that Beige server and start playing around with FreeNAS. That's my next goal. FreeNAS 11 is out. I want to get it on an actual hardware install and play around with it. So if you're so inclined, throw a donation our way, and I'll give you a shout out for it and be eternally grateful to you. So thanks again for watching. We're glad you stopped by, and we'll see you on the other side.